That's the trailer for the Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution. It's set to play in theaters and air on PBS later this year. But today we bring you the first look at this brand new film. It tells the history of Black Panthers through rare archival footage and interviews with party leaders, rank-and-file members, and even police and FBI informants. I sat down this week for an extended interview with one of its subjects, Kathleen Cleaver. She served as communications secretary of the Black Panther Party, is now a law professor at Emory University. And with Stanley Nelson, the film's award-winning director. Nelson's made several films about the civil rights movement, including Freedom Riders and Freedom Summer. I began by asking Stanley Nelson why he's now drawn to making a film about the Black Panther Party.
There's no one reason. I mean, one of the reasons was that I was a 15-year-old kid in New York City when the Panthers came into being in 1966. And so I was enamored of the Panthers, you know. I'm 16 in New York. All of a sudden here, these people with leather jackets and berets and sunglasses and looking so cool and talking about revolution. I'm like, yeah, that sounds good to me. So I've always been fascinated by the Panthers. And then, you know, as a filmmaker, there's always more than one reason why you want to make a film. And as a filmmaker, you know, it's just such a wonderful story. And the people who were part of the story, the majority of them are still alive. They were only 20 years old or so at the time. And the Panthers were this media sensation. So there's an incredible amount of footage and still pictures, you know, to help construct this film. So all of those things came together, and I became interested in the Panther story. But I think also I've realized, you know, how the whole story reverberates with what's going on in the country today.
Well, the issue of police brutality was seminal to the Black Panthers. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Black Panthers were started in Oakland, California, and it was 5 guys who started and said, you know, we have to do something about police brutality, which was heightened in Oakland. The Oakland Police Department was notorious. And so what they did, because there was a law in California that said you could carry a weapon, a loaded weapon, as long as it wasn't concealed. So they would drive around and follow the police. And when the police jumped out to make a stop, they would jump out behind the police and with their guns drawn and stand a little ways back and with their guns drawn and make sure that no brutality or violence occurred on the part of the police. And that's how the Panthers started. And from there, from these 5 or 6 guys, the movement just took off.
And explain who they were, those 5 or 6 guys.
They were college students. You know, this was Huey Newton, Bobby Seale, a couple of others. And they were college students, by and large, who just wanted to end the brutality that was in their lives with the police.
Kathleen Cleaver, how did you become a leader of the Black Panther Party?
I met Eldridge Cleaver, who came to a conference that SNCC had organized. He spoke at the conference. And when he went back to California, we were in love. And he wanted me to come and visit him. And I came to visit him in California. I came back to Atlanta in August. And in October, Huey Newton was shot, and he was wounded, and he was facing the gas chamber if convicted of police murder. And Eldridge said, you've got to come out here and help us. So I came back to California, I think it was in November, to work with the Panthers on that case. We got married in December.
You were born in Texas?
Yes, unfortunately.
How did you go from where you came from to be a member of the Black Panther Party?
Well, it's not that complex. My parents were very well educated. They met at the University of Michigan, and my father had been an activist. He'd been working on NAACP campaigns in Texas to win the right to vote. My mother had been protesting school segregation in Richmond, Virginia. So my parents were part of civil rights activism, and the way I was brought up, and I lived in Alabama, where the movement started, and I wanted to be in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee when I was in high school. I wanted to do what those students were doing, protesting segregation in the South. I couldn't get there, and finally in New York in 1966, about 2 weeks after they called for Black Power, I was able to get into SNCC, and I was thrilled. It was the best thing that ever happened in my life. I could work in the Black Power movement. I could be in this revolution. That was it. And that was the beginning, and that's how I ended up in the Panthers, and that's how I continued. And
how did the Black Panthers compare to SNCC in terms of their goals, what they were responding to?
SNCC was on the decline. SNCC was actually collapsing When I got there, I didn't know this, but SNCC was an organization that was dependent on funding from outside, and once it turned into a Black Power organization, and there were some other issues that happened, the funding dried up, and people, when I came in, you had to basically support yourself, no money. And so the organization was declining, it was getting smaller. When I got involved with the Black Panthers, it was a brand new group. And in fact, there were like 5 when I got there, because most of them were in Santa Rita prison after the visits to Sacramento. So it was a new organization. It was very, very exciting. And all their principles in the it was one of the first organizations based on the concept of Black Power that had been articulated in Mississippi and by SNCC. And so I got involved with them. In December, Eldridge and I got married, and I stayed out there and continued to work with the Panthers.
How did King, Dr. Martin Luther King, fit into this picture?
In what way? My picture or the country?
In your picture, and did he inspire you? How did the Black Panthers relate to him?
Everyone was inspired on some level by Martin Luther King. He was a tremendously decent and caring person. He was extremely intelligent, and he inspired a lot of Christians. Now, Eldridge made a comment in one of his speeches in Nashville. He said, how about integrating some of this bloodshed? That was one of the issues we had, that it was too much that Black people should absorb all the punishment, and we should be forgiving, and we should want to be peaceful in the face of murderous brutality in the middle of the Vietnam War. Well, that wasn't really a message that a lot of young people cared for. And so when the Black Panthers came out and started talking about self-defense, droves and droves of young people wanted to do that, and I thought that was the best, that's the best. We followed Robert Williams, and he said, if you are confronted by a racist who believes himself superior, then he has, and you're armed, he has to consider, does he want to risk his superior life to take your inferior life? And if you have a gun, you can put him in that position, and 9 times out of 10, he doesn't, and that's the end of the violence. So we believe self-defense was a way to put a reduction into violence, and I accept that.
Stanley Nelson, you've done a documentary in the Freedom Riders on Freedom Summer. So as you were doing those, the Black Panthers, you were clearly looking at, people are responding to as you go further on into the 60s. How do they compare in their strategy?
Well, I think it's a different strategy, but I think it was, you know, it was a natural offshoot of some of those movements. So Freedom Riders leads into Freedom Summer. You know, what happens at the end of Freedom Summer is at the Democratic National Convention, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party is defeated, you know, in kind of an underhanded way by Lyndon Johnson and his forces. And so many of the people in SNCC at that time felt betrayed. They felt, we've done everything we can do. We've done it the right way. We've done everything. You've said you're on our side. And then when we get to the moment when we have to share power, you back out. So
and this was to replace the all-white Mississippi party with the integrated party.
Right, and Johnson, you know, it's too long a story to tell right here, but Lyndon Johnson engineers kind of underhanded way to defeat them. And at that point, a lot of people left SNCC. And some left the movement altogether. But one of the things that happens at the end of Freedom Summer is there's a shot of Stokely Carmichael goes down to Alabama and gets on top of that truck or bus or whatever it is and starts yelling, Black Power, Black Power, Black Power. And that's one of the first scenes in the Black Panthers' Vanguard of the Revolution, is Stokely Carmichael up on that vehicle yelling, Black Power, Black Power, Black Power. So the things, one thing really led to the other.
That's Stanley Nelson, the award-winning director of the new film, The Black Panthers, Vanguard of the Revolution, and Kathleen Cleaver, who served as communications secretary of the Black Panther Party. We'll continue our conversation in a minute.